Hello, good morning. I hope that you're all well and that you've had a good week. The videos I've been uploading over the last few weeks have been focused solely on the online tutorial for the Little ABC sampler. And this video at the end will have the tutorial for this week's stitch. But I really want to have a catch up with you all. There's been so much happening. Before I start talking about samplers, I do have to mention that last month the needlework world lost somebody who has contributed so much to the history of textiles. Dorothy Bromley Felon passed away in May. Now, Dorothy was an author. She was involved with textile museums and she created 2 textile exhibitions. Her name is probably best known as she co-authored the book on the Good Heart samplers. This is an amazing book which she wrote with Eva Lotta Hansen and Jacqueline Holsworthy. If you haven't got this book, it's well worth having in your library. Dorothy also wrote the book, The Point of the Needle, 5 Centuries of Samplers and Embroideries. And there's another 2 books which I have got in my library. One is on the Florentine stitch and one is on Bargello. Her obituary appeared in the Times this morning, and I always read the obituaries in the Times. I believe that if somebody warrants their obituary in the Times, then they've led a life that is worthwhile. So when I was reading Dorothy's obituary, I was really surprised to find out that in her earlier years, she was an actress that appeared in film, TV and on the stage. She actually went to Hollywood and made a film as a young woman. You never know what's behind a person until you maybe talk to them or read about them. I thought that was very interesting. Anyway, we've lost somebody who has made a huge contribution. Okay, this week our build has started, so life has sort of, our normal routine has drastically changed. There's been a lot of noise, a lot of dust, even though they've worked very respectfully, of our home. It's going to be a long summer with all this work. This week we released a sampler and we also made an announcement about a forthcoming event. Okay, so let's talk about the sampler first. The sampler is a multiplication table sampler called Multiply Kindness. This is an original design, and many things in this sampler mean something to my family. The verse I chose very carefully, and it's multiply kindness, divide your worry, subtract sorrow, but most importantly, add much happiness. This is something that Ray and I believe in quite strongly. Even in the worst times, you can find happiness. And, do a good turn, you multiply kindness. And if you share your worry, it is halved. In the sampler, I've recorded my initials and Ray's initials, but you can record your family initials, whether it's your husband and yourself or your children. If you go to the web page for Multiply Kindness, you will see under the thumbnails a tab that has the font that I chose, and it has all the alphabet charted out so that you can personalise this sampler for yourself. The colours in the sampler are all chosen from my garden, the flowers in my garden. You'll see in many of the design, my original designs, flowers feature quite heavily. I'm enchanted with my garden and flowers. Some of the colours are there to represent certain friends. I cannot think of my friend Gemma without thinking of purple. She is obsessed with the colour purple. If I think of Melissa, I think blue. If I think of Terry, I think yellow. The orange and the lilacs and the mauves, they are all colours that we see in the magnificent sunsets that we have in our little cove. There's so many elements in this sampler that mean something to me. Now, something that a few people picked up very quickly on social media is that in this sampler, this model, 7 times 7 is 47. Well, we all know that 7 times 7 is 49. This is not an error on my stitched sampler. That's there because it means something to us. All families have their secret family language. In the booklets, this is the proof. I haven't had the printed booklets yet. You will see that it's charted correctly, and in the PDF downloads, the graph shows 7 times 7 is 49, but there's 47 on this sampler for a reason. This is a sampler for my family. Okay, so this sampler is available for download and for pre-order. The booklets have been delayed because my printers have had a major flood, and unfortunately the flood occurred over a weekend, so there was a tremendous amount of damage to orders they'd already printed and to the printing presses. But they have promised me that I will receive the printed booklets this week, and as soon as they arrive they will get shipped out to our distributors and for those people who've already placed a pre-order. For those of you who've already received the PDF, you would have read the story behind the sampler and why I chose to do a multiplication table sampler. It was a multiplication table sampler that started my journey with samplers. And basically I was sat waiting for a hygienist appointment at my dentist, and I picked up a magazine, and as I flicked through this magazine there was an article on Moira Blackburn, and there was this photograph of Moira, and all around her were the most gorgeous samplers, and my eyes went straight to a multiplication table sampler. And this is decades ago. My son was, you know, a toddler, and I thought, I want to do that for my son's bedroom. You know, I thought what a wonderful teaching aid having a multiplication table sampler, just like you have like A is for apple, B is for bat, etc. So a very short time afterwards, I went to a needlework store and I looked for the chart. They didn't have it, but they did have kits for Moira's work. So I left with a kit that was Ada and cotton thread. And that winter I stitched the sampler, and I was head over heels in love with samplers. So over the ensuing years, I stitched my way through Moira's entire portfolio. And when I'd exhausted it, by that time, the internet was in people's everyday lives. So I went onto the internet and I started to search for this multiplication table sampler. I never found it. But what I did find was the needlework community online, which in those days was on forums or blogs, and the world of linen and silk and reproduction samplers really opened up for me. That led to me starting to collect antique samplers and to start reproducing them. So that's why I wanted to stitch a multiplication table sampler. I haven't reproduced one because although I have many in my private collection, none of them made my fingers itch to stitch. So there we have it. That's the story behind this sampler, and the sampler is dedicated to Moira Blackburn, who has played a pivotal role in imparting skills and knowledge to women of our generation. So this one is for Moira. Okay, so the sampler. The stitch count is 395 stitches by 299. It can be stitched on Aida or linen. The linen I chose was Seraphim antique linen. And here it is. I'm thrilled with how this linen has worked. This sample has been hanging for a little time in my home, and as I've had visitors, everybody has expressed surprise that this is not an antique sampler, purely because of the way that linen has been over dyed. It's so subtle. I'm very, very thrilled with it. There's just enough aging, but not taking away or overpowering the design. Now, as I love colour, there is a lot of colour in this sampler. So there are 22 different colours. I stitched the sampler with Soie 103, but in the booklet there are the conversions for Soie d'Alger and DMC. If you stitch this sampler on 14 count Aida, which is 28 count linen, it would be 28.21 inches by 21.36. If you stitched it on 18 count Aida, 36 count linen, it would be 21.94 inches by 16.61. If you stitched it on 46 count linen, it would be 17.17 inches by 13 inches. I hope you enjoy it. It's brought a lot of pleasure to me, and my husband, as an accountant, is enchanted by the sampler. Okay, so what else has been happening this week? Well, this week, or last weekend, I should say last Sunday, Hobby House Needleworks announced my workshop for 2025. The workshop is useful work, and it's being presented by myself and my dear friend Kathleen Littleton of Cross Stitch Antiques. Now, I did have this up on my screen, but my Facebook drives me mad these days. Let me just bring up this Facebook post and I can read to you about the workshop. So, useful work is based on samplers worked with the purpose of learning, and the samplers are from the private collection of myself and Kathleen Littleton. The workshop will be hosted by Hobby House Needleworks from Friday, August 8th through to August 10th, 2025. Useful work will feature samplers made not only for the purpose of learning, but to showcase the girls' accomplishments with their needles. The workshop will be a series of stitching tutorials and talks. The talks will focus on the history and stories behind the samplers, and we will also have some surprise activities at the workshop as well. If you've been to one of my workshops, you know that we always like to have fun, and we throw in some curveballs into what we do in the workshops. The main class project is one that I've had a little while and have been holding back for something special. It's a very unique sampler, it's very eye-catching. The theme of the sampler is, it will enchant you, and the colour palette is to die for, it's gorgeous. Now, Kathleen and myself, we're both very fortunate to have in our private collections samplers that our husbands have gifted to us, and coincidentally Kathleen's husband and my husband have both gifted us a sampler from a certain genre of sampler, and we are going to, well, we've reproduced those two very, very special samplers so that we can share those with the attendees at the workshop. So there's going to be 3 amazing samplers for the attendees at this workshop. Our talks will cover many other samplers as well. Now, registration opens tomorrow. That's Sunday, the 16th of June, 2024 at 5 p.m. EST. What you need to do is go to Hobby House Needleworks website, and on their homepage you will see details of the workshop, and you will be able to click on that notice and go through to registration, which opens at 5 p.m. tomorrow, June the 16th, 5 p.m. EST time. Once the registration process has been complete, a little time after that, attendees will receive the first bonus project so that they can start having fun straight away. We don't wait to the actual workshop, we start having fun straight away. Okay, Kathleen and I, we do hope that you will join us for what promises to be a very special workshop. There's a lot of content in this workshop. You know, we're going to have hands-on stitching tutorials. We're going to have a series of lectures and some fun activities as well. And I know that the goodie bag that Kathy and David are planning for this event is going to be knockout. I know that Kathleen has some gifts for attendees, and I will be bringing gifts for attendees as well. Okay, right. What else do I want to talk about? I want to talk about Hannah Campbell. Now, this is not the model for Hannah Campbell. This is actually, what is that? Just a second. Yeah. This is actually my friend's sampler, which she has stitched. I always stretch and lace her frames for her and get them framed down here. And this is waiting to go back to her now. So this is Hannah Campbell, and Hannah has been stitched on 56 count. It's honestly, this is just an amazing sampler. You know, my friend is such a gifted needle worker. So beautiful. This is covering up her name. It's been really lovely to see on social media, as people have been posting finishes, how many people are putting their names on their samplers discreetly, but where they are visible so that people can tell they are not an original sampler. I'm going to be packing this week and sending it to my friend so she can have it on her sampler wall. Okay, let's start the tutorial. Before we start today's tutorial, I would just like to give you an update on the Royal School of Needleworks stitch bank in relation to the long arm cross stitch. The RSN have now come back to me and have advised that they have corrected the entry for long arm cross stitch. It is now shown with the stitch being worked vertically on the back of the fabric. And it's quite coincidental that this week's stitch is a diagonal stitch on the front with a vertical stitch behind. And here it is on the little sampler, and you will see that on the back it's short vertical stitches. Now, I had trouble finding a name for this stitch. It's like a leg of a cross stitch, but I actually found it in a needle specimen book that was put together by a child in 1889, and in some very old manuals for the education of children, and the stitch is quite simply referred to as a sewing stitch. And the children learnt this stitch very early in their needlework education. And in every entry I have read that refers to this stitch, including the young girls' needlework exercise book, there is great emphasis on the needle being held facing the chest as the stitch is being worked, and that's because they worked it from bottom right to top left, and as they put their needle in to make that vertical stitch on the back, the needle was pointing towards the chest. And that's the main message that comes across in this book about the position of the needle. Now, there's not much to learn about such a simple stitch. We're going to look at it being laid, but we'll also look at different versions of this stitch and how you can use it to great effect in your needlework.
As I'm working on a frame, I'm going to use the stab method. I bring my needle up bottom right and I take it back down top left. My needle passes vertically on the reverse. I bring it back up bottom right and take it back down at top left. This is a very simple stitch. Please excuse the state of my hands. They're particularly bad this week as I've been doing a lot of work in the garden. As we are creating vertical stitches on the back of our work, I'm going to show you how I bury my start and end threads. Vertical threads give more grip when you bury your threads underneath them. All I'm going to do is run my needle under the back of 3 stitches. Then I'm going to anchor the tail end by running it back under 2 stitches. I will now do the same for my starting thread. This is a neat and secure way of securing your tails. The next single diagonal stitch we're going to look at is the goblin stitch. It mimics tapestry embroideries. We're going to work it 1 thread wide by 2 threads high. It can be worked from right to left, but I'm going to demonstrate it working from left to right. You bring your needle up at top right and take it down at bottom left. You will bring your needle back up at top right and bring it back down at bottom left. This stitch is very similar to a tent stitch. The difference with tent stitch is that it is always worked over 1 thread. Let's have a look at the stitches on the back of our fabric. We have created a reversible stitch. To finish off your thread, bury it under the back of the stitches. Tent stitch is probably one of the widest used stitches in needlework and has played a major role in sampler history. It is also known as petite point, or the continental stitch. If you need to work cross stitches over 1 and your thread is too thick, tent stitch is a great substitute. You should work the tent stitch in the direction that you would lay the top leg of your cross stitch. When working from right to left, you should bring your needle up at bottom left and take it back down at top right. When working from left to right, you should bring your needle up at top right and take it back down at bottom left. This is important. You do not want your thread slipping under the intersection between the weft and the warp thread. Tent stitch can also be worked diagonally. Our first row is laid. To move to the second row, we drop down one stitch to the next row. Our needle, when working from bottom to top, passes horizontally on the reverse of the fabric. The second row is now complete and we have moved across to the next row. When working from top to bottom, our needle always passes vertically on the reverse of the fabric. We have now completed the third diagonal row. We will move to the fourth row by dropping down to the next stitch. As we are now working bottom to top, our needle is passing horizontally on the reverse of the fabric. To start the fourth row, we move across a stitch. This may all sound a little confusing, but re-watch the video and make notes in your journal. Think about the mechanics of the stitch and everything will click into place.
All we've looked at today is a single diagonal stitch, but you can do so much with that stitch. I think out of the stitches we looked at today, laying a tent stitch on the diagonal is probably the one that takes a little while to get your head around how your needle should be moving and the stitch path to take. Replay the video, make a note of the salient points which I try to emphasize, practice the stitch, and that stitch path will click in your brain. Over the last few weeks, we've looked at lots of stitches, but all of those stitches have just used a horizontal, a vertical, or a diagonal stitch. Combining those stitches, opens up so much to a needleworker. Next week's stitch is the blanket stitch or the buttonhole stitch. They're the same stitch, but we can use that stitch in so many different ways, and that's what we will be exploring next week. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I do hope that you will join Kathleen and myself at Hobby House Needleworks in the August of 2025 for the workshop Useful Work. In the workshop, we will explore lots of different stitches and we will look at some amazing samplers, and you will be getting the charts for 3 very special samplers. I'm off to walk the boys. The sun has actually come out. They've been very patient waiting. I've had a few paws on my legs saying, "Mummy, hurry up," but they've been good boys whilst I've been filming. Until next weekend, stay well, stay safe. Bye-bye.